spy movies always get me. The gadgets, the disguises, pulling off something impossible. But how much of that is actually real?
Right.
Well, today's deep dive is going to give us a little taste of the real deal.
Okay.
I'm going straight into Cold War espionage with this declassified CIA document called The Kidnapping of the Lanik.
And as that title suggests, this isn't your typical heist story. We're talking about U.S. intelligence, get this, borrowing an entire Soviet spacecraft.
An entire spacecraft.
An entire spacecraft.
Okay, you've got my attention. But before we get into all that, can we get a little context? What exactly was a Lanik and why was it such a big deal?
Okay, so picture this. It's the Cold War.
Okay.
The space race is in full swing. Both the U.S. and the Soviet Union are desperate to prove they are the best, technologically speaking.
Right.
The Soviets, they'd already put Sputnik, the first satellite, into orbit.
Yeah.
And Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space. Huge tensions were high.
High stakes, for sure. So where does this Lunik thing, where does that fit into all of this?
The Lunik program, this was a major win for the Soviets. These were unmanned spacecraft, and they were designed to explore the moon. Lunik 1, that was the first spacecraft to actually fly past the moon.
Wow.
And some of the others, they even impacted the lunar surface and sent back photographs.
No way.
This was groundbreaking stuff at the time, so naturally the U.S. wanted to know how they did it.
Yeah, I bet. So how do you even begin to, spy on something like that? Were we, pointing our own spy satellites at their launch pads, or...?
Well, satellite intelligence was definitely part of it, but this particular operation took a more direct approach. See, the Soviets, they decided to show off their achievements, right? So they had this traveling exhibition of all their scientific accomplishments.
Okay.
And one of the main attractions, front and center, what appeared to be a Lunik spacecraft.
Hold on. They just, wheeled out a spacecraft for anyone to see.
Seems that way.
That seems a little risky, even for the Soviets.
It does, doesn't it?
What were they thinking?
Well, on the surface, it seems strange. But that's exactly what got the attention of U.S. intelligence.
Okay.
Was it a real Lunik? Was it a carefully constructed replica? Or something in between? Getting your hands on even a disassembled version of your rival's technology during the Cold War, that was huge. The potential intelligence you could get from that was enormous. So the CIA, they needed to figure out what they were dealing with.
So how did they do it? I mean, did they just, walk up to the Soviets and be like, hey, can we get a closer look?
Not quite, but a little luck never hurts. After the exhibition closed in one city, U.S. intelligence, they used, well, let's just say some clever maneuvering.
Yeah.
And it gave them a brief window to get to the Lunik.
Okay. And what did they find? Was it the real deal or was it some, elaborate fake?
It was a real Lunik.
Wow.
A real production model.
Really?
Not flight ready, of course.
Right.
The engine and most of the electronics were gone.
Right.
But even so, it was a gold mine.
Yeah.
Think about it. The chance to study Soviet engineering up close, the materials they used, their manufacturing processes, this was really valuable intel.
I bet. But how do you even begin to extract that kind of information? I mean, it's not like they had the instruction manual.
This is where it gets really interesting. It all comes down to something called factory markings. Basically, every component, every piece of equipment, especially in something as complex as a spacecraft, it all carries these tiny markings.
Markings? Like what, serial numbers and stuff?
More than that.
Yeah.
They could be numbers, symbols, even just a specific way that a part was stamped. They might seem meaningless, but to a trained analyst. Factory markings, they're like fingerprints.
Fingerprints that could lead them back to, the factory where the part was made, the individual engineers who designed it?
Exactly. Those markings can tell you where they got the materials, production numbers, even specific manufacturing techniques they used. It's like piecing together a puzzle. You start with these tiny little clues, and you can build up this detailed picture of what your adversary is capable of.
Wow, talk about sweating the small stuff. Okay, so they stuck a peek, gathered some intel. That's a win, right? Case closed.
You know, intelligence agencies, enough is never in their vocabulary. This was just a taste. The real prize was getting more time with the Lunik, really digging deep. Problem was, the spacecraft was on tour, and the Soviets weren't exactly keen on just handing it over for a second inspection.
So what'd they do? Just follow it around, hope for another lucky break?
It wasn't quite that simple, but they did need to stay one step ahead. They used intercepted shipping manifests, surveillance, really anything they could to track where this Lunik is going.
I bet that was nerve-wracking. Always looking over your shoulder, making sure no one was following you.
There were definitely some tense moments, that's for sure. Don't forget, this was the Cold War. The stakes were incredibly high, but they had a plan and a dedicated team from the Joint Factory Marking Center.
A whole team just for factory markings.
Specialists in their field, ready to be employed at a moment's notice.
Wow. Okay, so the Lunik is on the move. The team is standing by, waiting for their shot. How do you actually pull off a borrowing like this?
They chose their moment very carefully. They waited until the Lunik was at its most vulnerable, and that was during transport between the exhibition hall and the train station.
Okay.
They found this, but seemed like a pretty ordinary stretch of the route, a truck route, less traffic, fewer eyes.
And hopefully no KGB agents grabbing a bite to eat nearby.
Precisely. So picture this. The truck carrying the Lunik, it's on its way, totally unaware it's about to be redirected.
Oh, no.
The CIA team, they spring into action, using a bit of Hollywood-style misdirection. They even had a fake driver, to keep everything looking normal.
This is incredible. So where'd they take it? Some, secret underground bunker.
Not quite as glamorous as all that, I'm afraid. They ended up in a rented salvage yard.
Oh, okay.
Not exactly high-tech espionage, but it provided the cover they needed.
And the Soviets had no idea.
Well, they did have a checker at the rail yard. He was supposed to keep tabs on all the exhibits as they arrived, but he hadn't counted on the CIA's resourcefulness. And hey, everyone's got to eat, right? While he was off enjoying his dinner, the real operation was about to begin.
Okay, so we've got the Lunik tucked away in this salvage yard. We've got this team of, factory marking specialists raring to go. This feels like the calm before the storm here. What happened next?
Well, getting it into the salvage yard.
Yeah.
This was just the first hurdle. Now they had to actually get inside the crate.
Right.
And this thing was seriously heavy duty. It was built like a tank, bolted from the inside.
Right.
There's no easy way in.
I'm guessing they couldn't just, bust the lock and figure it out later. So how'd they get inside?
They had to be smart about it. Think of them more like surgeons and burglars.
Effective.
Every move had to be precise. They couldn't leave a single sign that they'd forced their way in.
Right.
They spent hours prying open these roof planks. It was painstaking work. And they were battling against time, the humidity, everything. There's even this part in the report where they're working away and suddenly the street lights come on, bathing the whole salvage yard in light.
Talk about a heart-stopping moment. So they finally get inside. What's it like? Are there blinking lights, alien writing on the walls?
Not quite as exciting as all that, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Just a really cramped, dark, and you can imagine incredibly tense space.
Yeah.
Just picture it, inches away from this piece of Soviet technology and knowing that one wrong move could trigger an international incident.
Man, that is a lot of pressure. What were they even focused on once they got inside?
Every single detail mattered.
Yeah.
They were taking photographs, meticulously documenting every factory marking, every component.
Okay.
They had all this specialized equipment to make sure they captured everything.
Wow.
There's even this one detail in the report. It's just incredible.
What?
At one point, they had to cut a wire to get to this one crucial area.
Yeah.
But then, after they were done, they recreated the seal flawlessly. They even copied the Soviet stamp that was on the plastic.
Wow. So they weren't just stealing intelligence, they were forging it too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The attention to detail is amazing.
That's wild. Did they end up finding anything surprising inside? Anything the Soviets missed?
Funny you should ask. So remember how the Soviets had removed all the important stuff, the engine and electronics?
Yeah.
Turns out they overlooked a couple of things.
Really?
The team, they found these two couplings that actually gave them even more intel about the Lunik's design.
Wow.
It just goes to show, every piece of the puzzle matters.
Every single one. So the clock was ticking, though, right? I mean, they couldn't stay in there forever.
Exactly. As dawn approached, they had to put it all back together.
Oh, man.
And not just put it together, but make it look like they were never even there. It took them hours, but they did it. The spacecraft, it went back into its crate with the same care and precision they used to take it apart.
Just like that, they vanished into the night. What happens next?
Well, they loaded the crate back up, drove it to where they'd agreed to meet, and the original driver was waiting there, totally oblivious.
Wow.
Eventually, the Soviet checker, he shows up at the rail yard, checks the Lunik off his list, and that was that. The Lunik went on its merry way, just like nothing had happened.
This whole thing is incredible. It's like something straight out of a movie, but beyond the sheer audacity of it all, what did we actually learn from this whole Lunik escapade?
Remember those factory markings we were talking about?
Yeah.
Those were the real prize. The analysts, they were able to identify the specific companies that made the parts, the production numbers, all because of those markings. It gave them these crazy insights into how the Soviets designed things, their engineering, their whole philosophy. For example, there was one marking. It showed they were using this new type of alloy in the heat shield.
Hmm.
So U.S. scientists, they were able to use that to develop similar materials for our own space program.
Wow, that's huge.
It wasn't just about getting their hands on a spacecraft, you see. It was about understanding how the Soviets thought, how they worked. That's the kind of intelligence that gave the U.S. a real edge in the space race.
An edge, I mean, they weren't supposed to have.
Exactly. This whole operation just goes to show how far intelligence agencies were willing to go during the Cold War. I mean, they were determined to understand their enemies, and they used every tool at their disposal. It really makes you think, even with all our technology, the satellites, the surveillance, sometimes there's just no substitute for old-fashioned human ingenuity.
It's true. It really makes you wonder, what other secrets from that time are still out there, just hidden in plain sight?
You got me. I guess we'll just have to wait for the next declassified document to surface, won't we? Until next time.